All right, we've got a lot going on with the situation in Israel and Palestine. We have a lot going on in the news cycle with Donald Trump and all of the different legal accusations. To help me understand that, I have super lawyer Alan Dershowitz with me. Alan, thank you so much for coming on again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, I want to get your thoughts on this $454 million fine against Donald Trump. Many people are saying this is excessive. This goes against his rights. What are your thoughts on this whole Letitia James, Engeron situation in New York?
It's an outrage from beginning to end. She campaigned on the promise to get Trump. You don't have prosecutors campaigning to try to get particular individuals. That's Stalin and Lavrenti Beria. Beria tells Stalin, "Show me the man, I'll find you the crime." That's essentially what Letitia James promised. We'll find something. Don't worry, we'll get him. And then she gets this judge to impose a fine that's so outrageous, clearly in violation, in my view, of the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment prohibits excessive fines. Although it's generally applicable in criminal cases, I believe it's applicable whenever the government brings the case. It wouldn't be applicable perhaps in a case where you had two litigants suing each other, but here you have the government. I think the appellate court sent a message by reducing the bond to 150 million, still very excessive, that they're going to reduce the fine as well. And I think if they don't, the Supreme Court of the United States should. Fines should reflect the amount of damage actually done or the need to deter. This was a number made up out of whole cloth.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do you think the appellate court, other than sending a signal, do you think they were signaling that they think maybe he's completely innocent, or just that the fine was excessive?
I think that the fine was excessive. Look, this is New York. In New York, they would fine a ham sandwich if its name had Trump on it. And here you have a bologna sandwich, because this is not a case here. Why does the Attorney General of the state think that her priorities are going after somebody to protect the bank that didn't lose any money? She should be spending her time protecting ordinary people, consumers who are getting really treated by major corporations. Here, the banks came out with a profit. They would lend them again. No harm, no foul. And the judge had to figure out some convoluted way of coming up with a number, and the number doesn't reflect reality at all.
Yeah, I would think that she could spend her time on the immigrant crime situation, on the rallies calling the river to the sea against the Jewish people in New York, this random event of men just randomly punching women in the face on the streets of New York. But that's not what she campaigned on. And so I've always thought it's kind of interesting that she's one of the few politicians that has kept her word. I'll go after Trump. She gets in and then she goes after him. But it doesn't seem like a good use of her time.
Not only that, it's a distortion of justice. Look, I wish I had been clever enough to have named my book Get Trump. It wasn't original with me, though. That's her campaign pledge. I named the book based on her campaign pledge. And then you have Bragg, the district attorney of Manhattan, also promising to get Trump and going after Trump on the most convoluted, made-up criminal case I've seen in 60 years. The idea that if you pay hush money, which is perfectly legal, Alexander Hamilton did it to protect his family from knowing about his affair with Mrs. Reynolds. If you pay hush money, you suddenly have to disclose it on your corporate forms. That's absurd. No one in history has ever been prosecuted for not disclosing the payment of hush money. Who would ever pay hush money if you knew the next day you had to disclose it? So it's a made-up case, but this is a New York jury. 75–80% of them voted against Donald Trump, and the likelihood of him getting a fair trial is minimal.
Yeah. What about let's skip down to Georgia. All of a sudden this Trump election interference case with Fani Willis kind of comes to a screeching halt. And suddenly Fani Willis is the one being investigated. Some people have said that she perjured herself. Either way, it does seem that there was conflict of interest, possible misconduct with paying her lover and things like that. What are your thoughts on the Georgia case?
The evidence is overwhelming that she perjured herself. There are many people in jail today, some on death row, on less compelling evidence. She swore under oath that she did not have an affair until after he was appointed. Now we have cell phone pings. We have other evidence. We have eyewitness testimony. We have statements attributable to them themselves. We know the affair began earlier. Everybody knows it. Everybody who watched that hearing came away with the same belief, as the judge did. She's not telling the truth, but the judge didn't have the courage to go all the way. He said there was an aura of mendacity. I have reason to doubt. He did everything but say perjury. Well, I'm going to say it. Perjury. I think she committed perjury. I think she committed conspiracy to commit perjury, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. And she should be the subject of investigation. The idea that somebody like her, a liar, should be going after Donald Trump on the claim that he and other people didn't tell the truth is so hypocritical. So, but this is Georgia, and it's an election year. The judge is running for re-election. The case is being appealed. Let's hope that justice is done and that the Court of Appeals will do the right thing in saying, even based on the findings that the judge made, there should have been a disqualification of Fani Willis. How you get to a point where you disqualify him but not her is absurd. And, you know, the judge put it in terms of a choice. There's no choice. Obviously, he was going to have to leave, but if they conspired together to lie on the witness stand, then obviously they both have to be disqualified.
Yeah, and that shocked me. It was like, okay, you both lied. One of you can stay. It did seem a bit confusing to me. Another thing I hope that you could help clarify for my audience is Jack Smith in the presidential records case down in Florida. He is asking Judge Eileen Cannon to throw out the Presidential Records Act, not make it a part of the jury instructions, but yet wants to keep the Espionage Act as if Donald Trump was a spy selling United States secrets to Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. What are your thoughts on the situation with Jack Smith?
Well, I wrote an op-ed saying that the word espionage should not be allowed to be used in the courtroom. This is not an espionage case. Obviously, the statute just happens to be called the Espionage Act. And of course, the Presidential Records Act is relevant. Let the jury decide whether or not the defense is a valid one. But that's not what Jack Smith's doing. Jack Smith's trying desperately to create a record where he can get her recused, because what he's terrified about is there might actually be a fair trial for Donald Trump in Florida. We know there can't be a fair trial in the District of Columbia. And Jack Smith's very happy about that because he has a jury pool of 95% people who hate Donald Trump. He knows there's not going to be a fair trial in Georgia, and there's probably not going to be a fair trial in New York. And he's terrified that there might actually be a fair trial in Florida. So he's trying to get rid of the judge who might give him a fair trial. And he went really overboard in attacking the judge the other day. And that seemed to me to be a prerequisite for trying to make a motion to recuse.
Yeah, okay. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson has said, if Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine can be invited by Nancy Pelosi to speak in the House chamber, then why can't Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel come and plead his case and the need of support for Israel? What are your thoughts on allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to speak to Congress?
Of course, constitutionally, each house has the right to invite whoever they want. And Benjamin Netanyahu spoke once before to Congress. I know, I was there. I was sitting in the front row next to Elie Wiesel and next to Prime Minister Netanyahu's wife. So I think he should be allowed to make his case. And especially now that President Biden announced that there might be a change in policy toward Israel because of a terrible mistake that Israel made. It was a terrible, terrible mistake, but it was an honest mistake. They were not intending to kill people from the World Kitchen. Their friends, the people from the World Kitchen, helped Israelis. It's the only humanitarian group that is not anti-Israel. Doctors Without Borders is a Hamas front. They operate out of Hamas hospitals, and they work with Hamas. UNRWA is a Hamas front. The Red Cross is biased against Israel. The only humanitarian group that's not biased against Israel is World Kitchen. So there's no conceivable reason why Israel should ever have bombed. That was a terrible mistake. But if you listen to CNN, which has been horrible on this issue, it's become kind of Hamas central. If you listen to CNN, they're trying to create a moral equivalence between what Hamas did on October 7th, rapes, beheadings, murders, burning people alive and an honest mistake that Israel made. Speaking of burning people alive, I was just recently in Israel. I met with the prime minister twice. I met with the president, met with the head of the Mossad, met with the heads of the military. And I was taken to the house where a woman who was a Canadian named Vivian Silver, who was a peace activist, she would go every day to the border of Gaza and bring Gazans into Israel and take them to the hospital at her own expense. She ended up being burned alive in her safe room, probably by the very people she took to the hospitals, because they went directly to her house. They knew exactly where her safe room was, and they burned her to death alive. And to make any comparisons between what Hamas did, the rapes, the beheadings, the murder of children, the taking of hostages, and an honest accident of exactly the same kind the United States made. On the way out of Afghanistan, a drone hit somebody who everybody thought was probably a terrorist. He wasn't. He was innocent, and his whole family was killed. The United States apologized, paid some compensation. It was a one-day story. But with CNN, it's an everyday story, and it becomes an opportunity for President Biden to threaten to change policies toward Israel. A big mistake, and it's going to cost him the election if he makes that mistake. I have to tell you, if Biden turns against Israel, he is going to lose this election because Michigan, it involves a couple of 100,000 people. They have nowhere to go. The Arabs and the Muslims, what, they're going to vote for Trump? They're not going to vote for Trump. But Zionists, people who support Israel, Jewish voters, we have someplace to go. We could vote for Trump. We could vote for Bobby Kennedy. And our votes are at risk. And I can tell you, I did a piece in the Wall Street Journal the other day, really quoting a statement that the late Joe Senator Lieberman and I wrote together just hours before he died, in which we said, don't take our vote for granted. And you can't take our vote for granted. I'm not sure. For the first time in any presidential election since 1960, when I voted for John Kennedy, first time since 1960, we're talking 64 years, first time ever, I don't know who I'm going to vote for in this election.
Interesting.
I have an open mind.
Yeah, I saw yesterday, this was heartbreaking. One of the hostages, a beautiful Israeli girl, she said, all of the young women are being sexually assaulted, the remaining hostages. And she gave details that I don't want to share in this video, but it was just absolutely heartbreaking. Tell me about your book, War on the Jews and How to Get Rid of Hamas. Can it actually be done? Is it just an idea that will live on long past this war? What are your thoughts?
No, it's just like Nazism and the fascism of Japan. When we defeated Germany and we defeated the Nazis and we defeated the imperial armies, we defeated Nazism as a theory, and we defeated fascism. There are still a few Nazis left in Germany. There are still a few fascists left in Japan, but the ideology was destroyed along with the leaders. And I think if Hamas is soundly defeated, the people of Gaza, the innocent ones, there are many in Gaza who aren't innocent. Let's be very clear about that. Some of the people who came over after Hamas did participated in the rapes and the murders. Some of the people allow their homes to be used as places to store rockets. They allow themselves to be used for human shields. These are not innocent people, but there are some innocent people in Gaza. I don't know what the percentage is. Some 70% supported the massacres that happened on October 7th. Are they innocent? Well, they may be innocent technically, but I'm not shedding any tears for people who rooted for the Hamas murders. Let them pay a price for their ideology as well. And so, it's a complex issue, but Israel must be allowed to defeat Hamas. If it's not, it's coming to a theater near you. And I think Putin learned that lesson. It literally came to a theater near him in Moscow. No, it wasn't Hamas, but who put the idea in the heads of terrorists? It was all Palestinian terrorists, started in large part with the Olympic murders of 11 Israeli athletes at the Olympics, which was praised by many people. And what happened on October 7th was praised on October 8th by the National Lawyers Guild, by 13 groups at Harvard, including Amnesty International. And so what we have is encouragement of more terrorism by Hamas, because if Hamas is allowed to emerge from this intact, A, its ideology will continue, and B, its barbarism will continue. I think if Hamas is soundly defeated and Qatar and the United States and the European Union do what was done in Germany and Japan after the Second World War, the Marshall Plan, rebuilding the country, showing the people of Gaza that they could be Singapore in the Mediterranean. And they could have been starting in 2005, but instead they voted for Hamas. Then Hamas murdered the Palestinian Authority leaders and turned them into an open-air prison. Yes, it is an open-air prison, but not the responsibility of Israel. The reason for that is Hamas. Hamas had all the money. The same thing is true of the alleged famine. There's no famine in Gaza. There is hunger. People aren't getting 3 meals a day. They're getting 2 or 1 meal a day. And to the extent there is hunger, it's because Hamas is stealing the food. We know that Hamas has enormous amounts of resources, barrels of grain that they're keeping from the people, just the way they're keeping the tunnels from being used by people to protect themselves. In Israel, everybody has access to a shelter. In Gaza, only Hamas has access to shelters. They deny shelter and they deny food and they deny medicine to the average person because they want Gazans to die. The more Gazans die, the more Israel suffers in the court of public opinion. That's how screwed up the world has become.
Yeah, you're right. This is about a PR war more than an actual war, and they're getting lots and lots of sympathy that way, to the extent that now Iran is threatening some kind of massive attack on Israel in the next 48 hours. We're hoping and praying that that is a threat and not something that actually happens. Alan, I know you're very busy. I'm going to put a link to War on the Jews down below. Thank you so much for coming on, keeping up to date on all of these different trials and the situation in Israel. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day.